Hello, I am Clara Atkinson from Plum Creek Christian Academy in Dyer, Indiana, and I will be presenting The Song of the King by Max Lucado. The three knights sat at the table and listened as the prince spoke. My father, the king, has pledged the hand of my sister to the first of you who can prove himself worthy. The prince paused to let the men take in the news. He looked at their faces, each weathered from miles and scarred from battles. The kingdom knew no stronger warriors than these three, and these three soldiers knew of no fairer maiden than the daughter of the king. Each knight had asked the king for her hand. The king had promised only an opportunity, a test to see which was worthy of his daughter. And now, the time for the test had arrived. Your test is a journey, the prince explained, a journey to the king's castle by way of Hemlock. The forest? One knight quickly inquired. The forest, answered the prince. There was silence as the men pondered the words. Each felt a stab of fear. They knew the danger of Hemlock, a dark and deadly place. Parts of it were so thick with trees that the sunlight never found a floor. It was the home of the Hope-Knots, small, sly creatures with yellow eyes. Hope-Knots were not strong, but they were clever, and they were many. Some people believed that the Hope-Knots were lost travelers changed by the darkness, but no one really knew for sure. Will we travel alone? Carlyle spoke, a strange question to come from the strongest of the three knights. His fierce sword was known throughout the kingdom. But even this steely soldier knew better than to travel Hemlock unaccompanied. You may each select one companion. But the forest is dark. The trees make the sky black. How can we find the castle? This time it was Alan who spoke. He was not as strong as Carlyle, but much quicker. He was famous for his speed. Alan left trails of baffled enemies whose grasp he'd escaped by ducking into trees or scampering over walls. But swiftness is worthless if you have no direction. So Alan asked, how can we find the way? The prince nodded, reached into his sack and pulled out an ivory flute. There are only two of these, he explained. This one and another in the possession of the king. He put the instrument to his lips and played a soft, sweet aria. Never had the knights heard such soothing music. My father's flute plays the same song. His song will guide you to the castle. How is that? Alan asked. 3 times a day the king will play from the castle wall. When the sun rises, when the sun peaks, and when the sun sets. Listen for him. Follow his song, and you will find the castle. There is only one other flute like this one? Only one. And you and your father play the same music? Yes. It was Cassidan inquiring. Cassidan was known for his alertness. He saw what others missed. He could tell the home of a traveler by the dirt on his boot. He knew the truth of a story by the eyes of the teller. He could tell the size of a marching army by the number of scattered birds in flight. Carlyle and Alan wondered why he'd asked about the flute. It wouldn't be very long before they found out. Consider the danger and choose your companion carefully, the prince cautioned. And so they did. The next morning, the 3 knights mounted their horses and entered Hemlock. Behind each rode the chosen companion. For the people in the king's castle, the days of waiting passed slowly. All knew of the test, and all wondered which knight would win the princess. 3 times a day, the king sent the music soaring into the trees of Hemlock. And 3 times a day, the people stopped their work to listen. After many days and countless songs, a watchman spotted 2 figures stumbling out of the forest into the clearing. No one could tell who they were. They were too far from the castle. The men had no horses, weapons, or armor. Hurry, the king commanded to his guards. Bring them in. Give them medical treatment and food, but don't tell anyone who they are. Dress the knight as a prince, and we will see their faces tonight at the banquet." He then dismissed the crowds and told them to prepare for the feast. That evening, a festive spirit filled the banquet hall. At every table, the people tried to guess which knight had survived Hemlock Forest. Finally, the moment came to present the victor. At the king's signal, the people became quiet, and he began to play the flute. Once again, the ivory instruments sang. The people turned to see who would enter. Many thought it would be Carlyle, the strongest. Others felt it would be Alon, the swiftest. But it was neither. The knight who had survived the journey was Cassidy, the wisest. He strode quickly across the floor, following the sound of the flute one final time, and bowing before the king. "Tell us of your journey," he was instructed. "The Hope-Knots were treacherous," Caston began. "They attacked, but we resisted. They took our horses, but we continued. What nearly destroyed us, though, was something far worse." "What was that?" asked the princess. "They imitated." "They imitated?" asked the king. "Yes, my king, they imitated. Each time the song of your flute would enter the forest, 100 flutes would begin to play. All around us we heard music, songs from every direction. I do not know what became of Carlyle and Alon, but I know that strength and speed will not help one hear the right flute." The king asked the question that was on everyone's lips. "Then how did you hear my song?" "I chose the right companion," he answered as he motioned for his fellow traveler to enter. The people gasped. It was the prince. In his hand, he carried the flute. "I knew there was only one who could play the song as you do," Caston explained. "So I asked him to travel with me. As we journeyed, he played. I learned the song of your flute so well that though 1,000 false flutes tried to hide your music, I could still hear you. I knew your song and followed it." Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me."